Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the July issue of Compassion Chats. My name is Susan Marshall. I am the author of Mom's Gone Missing, When a Parent's Changing Life Upends Yours, and your host for these monthly Compassion Chats. We meet the fourth Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. Central. We bring some of the coolest people on the planet, like we did tonight, to share information, encouragement, stories, and sometimes even some advice. We meet right here on Zoom. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to get dressed up. You don't even have to be on camera if you don't want to be. But tonight we are, one more thing, we are recording the session. So please mute for the initial part of this chat. We do open it up at the end of each session for questions and answers, sharing stories, what have you. Tonight we are absolutely delighted to welcome an iconic voice and a delightful human being, Matt Lepay, the voice of the Wisconsin Badgers. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We're absolutely thrilled to have you.
My pleasure. Iconic. Wow. I've been called many things. I'm not sure I've been called iconic, so I'll take that. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Susan.
I can even spell that. So definitely.
I appreciate it.
Well, Matt, we always like to start this chat getting to know the individual who's joined us. We've had researchers, we've had people who've worked in the senior care industry, real estate agents, patient advocates, monthly bill payers. And now we have you, who has not only a well-known and recognized voice, but someone who has experienced this Alzheimer's journey. So give us a little bit about your story. And what led you to really commit to doing the work you do for Alzheimer's?
Well, I grew up in Southwest Ohio, so there's a little bit of a commute that's been involved here. Dayton, Ohio is where I'm from, and I could probably define myself as a mama's boy growing up. Spent a lot of time with her. My dad worked; he was a second shift worker for. You guys remember TWA, Trans World Airlines? He was with that airline. So my mom and I spent a fair amount of time together growing up, and I moved here to Wisconsin back in 1988. So I'm in my mid-20s when I made the move, and I was still very close. Talked with her, as often as I could. Would get home to Ohio when I could during the summer months, and obviously when the Badgers would play Ohio State, close enough. We were able to get together then. But go to fast forward here to what the last decade has been like. Once we got to about 2010, and definitely by 2012, it became very obvious that my mom was going through some major changes with memory, with very short temper. She handled the finances. In our family, paid the bills and did all of that, and mistakes were being made, and there were just some uncharacteristic things that were going on with her. And long story, make it a little bit shorter. By 2012, it was very obvious to us that she was dealing with this horrible disease, Alzheimer's disease. Now, again, I'm about 500 miles away, so I get there when I can. I can only do so much. And there was a great hesitation, probably not the first person to say this, a great hesitation to move my mom into a care facility. And she was very resistant, again, pretty common. But by 2015, it was beyond obvious that she needed round-the-clock care. So we made the move. I was home at the time, and we kind of tricked her to get into a facility. She was angry for about 20 minutes, and then kind of moved on. And that's where she was from 2015, the summer of 2015, until July. As we record this, Susan, we're just a month, or I should say 5 years and a couple weeks removed from when she passed. It was July 7th. 2017. So my father actually passed away in April of 2017. If you can die from a broken heart, and I believe you can, and I believe he did, this devastated all of us, but certainly devastated my father. So that is our kind of jump cutting to the conclusion here. But it was The thing that we noticed about this, and I would imagine that anybody who has gone through this in a family, is that we didn't have to go very far to find others who were going through the same thing. If it was friends, acquaintances, coworkers, and we would describe what's going on, and there would be a nod of the head saying, "Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. We dealt with this with our parents." Um, and the frustrating aspect is there's not been an answer yet to be able to knock this back. And you and I are on the board of visitors at the University of Wisconsin, the initiative to end Alzheimer's, and there's encouragement there. You see the research going on at UW Madison, but it is all diseases are awful, but this one is particularly devastating for what it does to everybody in the family. It was a heartbreaking process to see what my mom was going through, and at the point where she couldn't recognize me anymore, and
And that's,
that was a
isn't that
punch.
one of the hardest things, Matt, is when you know that she doesn't know you anymore. You did mention in an interview I saw that the family was in denial. Talk a
Big
little
time.
bit about that. It's certainly what we do initially. How did you kind of get past that?
Yeah, it was major denial. And she was always the kind of woman who would tell you that she's okay. And she had a major health issue. Actually, we both did about the same time in the mid 70s, different issues. But she had a significant circulatory problem that required surgery. She was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. But otherwise, other than an occasional cold, she was rarely sick. She grew up in eastern Kentucky on a farm, and was tough and smart, and uh, certainly never was afraid of work. And she would always downplay anything that might have been wrong with her. And if you question her, she might give you a cordial answer once, but then there was she'd punch back, kind of leave me alone. Well, yeah, I'm fine. But when we saw this with my mom, we were all in denial, and none more so than my father. And she would say things that really were outside of reality. And my dad spent a lot of time correcting her. She would say that she just talked to her brother, who actually had passed away 5 or 10 years ago. Instead of kind of going with it, my dad would always, "No, you didn't. He's gone. He died X number of years ago." And he got extremely frustrated with that. And I think we were all hopeful that this was something, that it wasn't Alzheimer's. It was maybe just a reaction to some other medications that she was on. And it's something that if you make a correction there, that her cognitive skills would return. But that it just wasn't the case. And she had had some significant episodes. Without getting into too much graphic detail, it became obvious that she needed hospital care, and then they ran all the tests, and then this was in 2012 when we got the diagnosis that nobody wants to hear. But denial was a major part of it, not just from my mom, but from all of us who thought there's no way this could be happening to her. Because we really, if there was a history of it in the family, we were unaware. So this was, even though we knew of some folks maybe who had dealt with it, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it until it hit really close to home. And then you learn more and more about how many other people are going through the same thing.
It's so interesting, Matt, that you say that. I've talked with many people over the years, and you and I chatted a little bit about this when we met last fall. It's not the kind of thing you announce at a cocktail party, right? And so the Alzheimer's and even dementia now has become sort of the C word, right? We didn't talk about cancer when you and I were growing up. This has that same kind of feel, although there's certainly greater awareness. It's becoming undeniable almost everywhere. But I think our first tendency is to say, just getting old, just getting forgetful. Do you have siblings?
Yes, well, I'm the youngest of three. My brother actually passed away a couple of years ago, and my sister, ironically, is very seriously ill with cancer. She is 6 years older, so she's back in Ohio. My brother spent most of his adult life in St. Louis, Missouri.
So did they have opinions, input, chatter about what was going on with your mom?
Yeah, it was. We had the brother sister meetings a couple of times, and the rare occasion when all three of us were together. My brother dealt with some medical issues for a number of years, and it made it difficult for him to travel. But one of the real tip-offs for us that there were problems, and I didn't know this, and then I was getting some phone calls, but my brother was getting more from my father in a desperate plea for money. We need this, we need X amount of dollars for so and so, because somehow, some way, I don't know if it was, dementia related. We kind of think it was, where my mom might have been suckered into some telemarketing calls and to, donate this, that, or the other. And my brother Tom had told me that, and I had mentioned a couple of instances similar, that like kind of desperate phone calls that I was getting as well. And my sister, who lives in Ohio, and she had much more direct contact, regular contact with the folks, and she was able to fill in some blanks. Sometimes, though, you could be too close to it and not notice. Whereas my brother and I, being both about 500 miles away, when it's every now and then, the changes become more noticeable. But we were all on the same page that something not good was unfolding, and then we had to figure out, how are we going to deal with this. My sister can only do so much, but she's there, and Tom and I helped as we could. I would get home when I could, but it was never felt like it was often enough.
Right. And I think that kind of goes with this whole caregiver journey, right? There's just, no matter what you do, it doesn't feel like enough, or perhaps the right thing, too fast, too slow. I wanted to ask you something though, Matt. There's sometimes a sense or a belief that celebrities or famous people, such as yourself, don't have the same challenges as ordinary people do. You have this really visible career, right? How did you work through what is a very personal, and as Dr. Nate Chin, a very emotional journey? How did you set aside some of the more personal things in order to be not only a happy face, but a happy voice?
Yeah, a challenge, I think, no matter what you do, right? No matter what line of work you're in. But I would get desperation text messages during a Badger game, or I would get them during Brewer games from my sister saying, "Hey, here's what's going on with my mom, and my dad's not reacting well to this." And it's like, where I'm calling a game and I say 3-1 now to Ryan Braun, texting back, "Hang in there, I will get you after the game is over." I mean, that literally was happening multiple times. But in this line of work, like any line of work, you have to focus as best you can on what you're being paid to do. But I'm not going to say it was easy. There are times, Susan, especially, I mean, I think, as I'm sure you do too, I think about my mom every day. I think about my mom and my dad every day. But I was talking to my wife, Linda, about this, and like, after a certain number of years, you're thinking, wow, this, we all walk through this, and we all, I've got this little saying, the clock keeps ticking. Like, there are things that you still have to do. And quite honestly, and it's cold as ice to say it, but it was what helped get me through it a lot. Just as a broadcaster, the person watching or listening cares about the game, and that's about it right now. We have this saying in our business: the fan doesn't care where you went to church, doesn't care who you voted for, just wants to know the score, what inning, or how much time is left, whatever sport we're talking about. And that is an icy cold view. But for me, it was the view that I had to take. And then after games, if we're on the road, I'd go to the hotel, or at home, I would drive home. then I would melt down a little bit. But during the game itself, you have to push through.
And that's an important reality, I think, for caregivers, regardless of our walk in life, whether we're working, whether we're retired or caring for people. That's a reality that we all have to deal with, right? The people that you are with you right now don't care about the rest of that stuff. And yet you have to manage it. So was that helpful for you to have that? I mean, you had to be absolutely focused on the action in front of you. Was that helpful? Or was it really kind of a layering of burden?
More helpful, I think. And in the case especially in my time with the Milwaukee Brewers, Bill Schroeder went through that with one of his parents. Craig Cashon, a longtime broadcaster in our state, was dealing with it as well. So the three of us occasionally. Now there were times we would just bust each other's chops because that's what you do in this racket anyway. But there are times we would talk about it, say, "Hey, how are things going with you, with your folks?" And we would commiserate. But having the game, and I'll never. When I got the call that my mom had passed, I was in Yankee Stadium, which was, I mean, if you're a sports fan or a baseball fan, that's a bucket list thing you do, right? You say, wow, you get to Yankee Stadium. And I'm sitting there in the television booth. This was maybe 3 hours or so, 2.5, 3 hours before first pitch. But I get a text message from my sister, call me when you can. It's urgent. So you get a text like that, it's not good. It's not going to be, hi, how are you? And I knew my mom was starting to slip. And I get the call. I'm in my booth. And my sister is crying and trying to, calm her down, saying, okay, I'll get back there. I'm in New York right now. But I get the call that my mom died, and I talked to my sister for 10, 15 minutes, whatever it was. And then right after that, I had to go down to the field for batting practice to listen to the manager and, talk to some people. And it was surreal. But I still remember moments from the game. And when you work a lot of games, a lot of times you don't remember as much as a fan might. But of all things, I remember the Brewers rallied to win the game. Jesus Aguilar hit a grand slam, and this is pretty cool. Mark Antanasio I sent emails to my bosses with the Brewers saying, hey, I'm going to have to, I'll work this series, but here's what's happened. I need to go to Ohio next week. And they were awesome. I mean, the principal owner, Mark Antanasio, comes up into the booth and say, hey, are you okay? They could not have been better. So long answer to your question, I think just having something in front of me that helped get me through at least most of the night. And then when I got back to the hotel room, then I went ahead and cried my eyes out. Right. But then the next day you're going to the ballpark again. So worked that series and then went home. But again, it's that old line with me, the clock is ticking. So you still have to do what you have to do.
And I think that word surreal is one that most caregivers, certainly in the Alzheimer's and dementia space, can really relate to, because we don't know much. We don't know. And I remember thinking this, and I don't know, Matt, if you and I talked about this, but when we had to move Mom from Arizona back to Wisconsin, we had no idea where she was on this spectrum. What care would she need? She still loved to make her coffee. She still loved to boil hard-boiled eggs. But how, we didn't know. And to your point too, we were 1,900 miles away, seeing her occasionally, but you don't see that, the day-to-day sort of incremental stuff. So the decision-making becomes really a crapshoot, basically, right? Flip the coin. How do you know if you're doing the right thing? Did you experience some of that as well, particularly when you got to the point where you knew you had to have Mom somewhere else other than her own home?
What I've found, Susan, is that we should have done it earlier. In 2014, Linda's father passed away in August, September. And then, so, you're there for that. And then we went back in October of, I think it was October of that year. And we spent some time with my mom, and she, there were more signs, but she was still doing some things at home, was cooking some. Linda was there to help. But by probably early 2015, it became obvious. Again, I'm a long way away, but I'm asking my dad, like, you're not letting her drive, are you? Oh, yeah, it's fine. She's going slowly. No, no. It's like, take the keys away, take the air out of the tires, whatever. But it's kind of the denial issue. But you can only push so far from an 8-hour drive away. That you got to get into. You have to get her into a. She needs help. She needs 24/7 care, and so my sister and I started to go through the process of trying to find the facility we could get her in, and you go through all the Medicaid and this, that, and the other. So it was difficult for a time, Susan, but by the time I was, I guess, the one who kind of said this has to happen in the summer of 2015, because my dad couldn't care for her anymore. She could not take care of herself in everyday functions. And my dad was not in a position to be able to be a 24/7 nurse, doctor, whatever, however you want to term it. So by that point, the decision it was hard emotionally, but from a practical standpoint, it was something that absolutely had to be done.
I really appreciate you saying that, Matt. I have talked with many people over the last number of years who say, I don't want to put them somewhere else. We're stealing their independence. We're stealing their identity, right? And in fact, one guy, after we did a community kind of event, he marched up to me and he said, I am not going to incarcerate my dad just because he's making mistakes. So that emotion, and yet, you said you wish you had done it sooner. What might have caused you to decide or act sooner than you did?
That's probably where some of my guilt, and I'll never shake it, because I never felt like I was there enough. Like when I started with the Brewers, it was 2014. It's been kind of, I love baseball, but it's been kind of nice not doing that this year. It's opened up the summers a little bit. But I wasn't that's normally a time I would be home more. So I'm always kind of looking in the mirror saying, if I was home more, I could have seen more, and maybe could have tried to talk my dad into making this move. But he was, as resistant as my mom was, my dad was too. And I think we were all afraid of my mom's reaction to it. But I think if I could turn back time, had a lot of fun with the baseball stuff. It was great, but you could turn back time. You're like, really? Maybe I should have been around a little bit more, and we could have helped her. I mean, obviously, you don't change the outcome of it, but it was. I guess, Susan, it comes down to what kind of stress do you want to have? Because there was the emotional stress that it just tore my father apart, and all of us really, but none more so than my father. But I think it could have taken a little bit of the burden off of him as well, but a different kind of burden he would have carried. But
and it's that coulda, shoulda, woulda that we can't know when we're in it. And your mother was losing her cognitive abilities, right? So how much did she even realize that was going on? Now, you're talking to the queen of rationalization here, so I offer that. I want to chat briefly, Matt, about your dad. When did you realize that he was really struggling?
I think, again, relatively early in the process, but by 2012 for sure, because the constant correction of things my mom would say, and we had to take her into the hospital. She was going through some significant physical issues. Some of it was a reaction of some other medications she was on. But she was they were running all the tests, and my dad was. We're all our entire family is in the hospital room with my mom, and my dad was. I knew then. I think the real gut punch there was when in front of everybody, including my mom, is asking the doctor, "Well, she doesn't have Alzheimer's, does she?" Because he just could not, he couldn't help himself. Rather than pulling a doctor outside of the room, he was just at that point. It was obvious that emotionally he was a wreck, and sadly, it never got better. We knew what was happening. We got the bad news, and from then on, that was again. I talked about my mom being tough. My dad grew up in the South Side of Chicago, so I don't know too many people from there who are soft. But he had a heart of gold. But there was a toughness to him, and that vanished. And that it was a summer day, July, August of 2012, when we found out what was up with mom.
And to see that radical change is heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yes.
And again, that feeling of helplessness. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I want to talk just quickly, Matt. Your mom, you said the last conversation you had with her took your hand and said, honey, all we can do is the best we can. What did she mean, do you think?
It was, you hear of certain folks who are going through this where there can be moments where they make perfect sense. And she used to always have little sayings like that. And this was between the time that my father died and when my mom passed. So I was back, I went to see my mom in late March because she was just entering into hospice care. And that turned out to be the last time I had lunch with my dad. That was the last time I saw my dad. We were back a week later for my dad's funeral, so I saw my mom there. And a couple of other times later, maybe in April, May. It was May, June when I was talking to my mom. But by that point, even in late March, she recognized me. Middle of April, she recognized me. But as it got into May, after that, late May, no, she thought I was my uncle. But I'm by her bed, and just we have the TV on and watching an old movie, whatever. And it was really out of the blue. She just put her hand on mine and said, all we can do is the best we can. And she also, Susan, said, and don't tease people. She hated, in probably any number of lines of work, right? But especially in sports, that's what you do. I mean, you're just busting each other up. And she despised that. So it's a moment that I always kind of hold near and dear. All we can do is the best we can, and don't tease people. And then after that was the last thing that she said that would have made any sense. After that, she couldn't really speak at all toward the end, but there was no recognition.
What a wonderful last bit of advice, right, for caregivers. All you can do is the best you can. And the fact that she knew and really appreciated that is kind of a sweet gift, right?
Yeah. It really it's so true, because you can only, we could all, hindsight's always 20/20, right? But we make the best decision we can with what's in front of us. And there's every emotion in the world that goes with this for caregivers, for anybody in the family. And in my belief is all of them, every emotion is okay. And there was a part of me, even uh, there was a sense of relief after, maybe not right away, but my thought was, okay, she doesn't have this anymore. And what's like, is this right? Like, should I almost felt guilty for feeling it? But and this is again with any long term illness, I suppose, but particularly with this, I tried. It's been a comfort for me when she passed. Um, you know what? She's okay now. She's just my own personal belief is that she's back ballroom dancing with my dad again. And that has helped. That gets me through the tough moments. So, which when you get into anniversary days, like you get into in July, those thoughts have come in handy.
Yes, and mom passed in June, same like a month before your mom did, and I still every once in a while say, "Geez, I got to call mom." It's like, yeah, I don't have that number, right? But I appreciate what you said when Lori and I were with mom that last, I don't know, however many hours it was. I can remember Matt holding her hand, sitting next to her bed and praying, please, God, if her room is ready, take her.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I mean, did I feel guilty about that? No, in the moment I did. I have since looked back on that, thought, you know what, I'm not sure that's really appropriate, but it is what it is. Right. And we are humans and we go through this whole range of things. And we do the best we can.
Yeah, no, it's well said. And from reading your book too, the emotional, how emotionally frayed we all get, and tempers get short within the family. And we went through that. We're trying to clean out my parents' home, which it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. There was stuff everywhere. And, my sister and I would get into it a little bit because I was kind of like, let's go. We've got to get this. And, you start to, you get mad at each other about stuff that you look back on it, like, really? But that's what this does. So, yeah, you do the best you can. But I do think relief it is a part of it. But you want to look back and say that you did the best you could.
Well, and I think what you just said reminds me of another word that I think is so powerful in this context, and that's forgiveness, right? Forgive ourselves for not having the answer. Forgive ourselves sometimes for being short, and forgive our family members as well, because we're not trained to do this, right? We go through it.
Yeah, they're definitely not a textbook with, there are obviously things written now, and I think your book is so helpful, uh, for all of us who have dealt with it. It's hard. You try to make the best of every moment. If there's a good day, you embrace that. Um, but you do have to, and I'll take it with me the rest of my life. I should have been there more. How? Who knows? But I just, it's not like we're driving across town. But you always, but then at the same time, Susan, I think the way the tempers would flare with the siblings, maybe it was better that I wasn't. Maybe I'm thinking more selfishly that I wanted to be there more because it was going to make me feel better.
Yeah.
But it's something that I'll never be able to probably resolve that conflict I've had.
So appreciate that. So let's chat a bit about the initiative to end Alzheimer's. How did you get involved? You're certainly visible in that work, granting interviews and really working with in the sports industry, letting people know that this is what you're doing and why it's so important. How did you get involved?
Well, we had made a donation. They have the senior, the Champions Tour, excuse me. They used to call it the Senior Tour, but the Champions Golf Tour, and at University Ridge, Steve Stricker, American Family Insurance, been obviously it's been a wildly successful event, and they've done different, they've helped different charities, including the initiative to end Alzheimer's. So it's called, Birdies for Alzheimer's. So we were donating X amount of money for birdies that were made throughout the course of the tournament. And Steve Ramig, who we obviously both know, he reached out, and we connected. He noticed that we were involved with that, and I thought this is awesome. I've at a point now where I've been doing this long enough. I want to use my platform for something other than describing touchdowns and 3-point baskets and all of that. It's great. I love that. But let's see if we can bring this into other areas. So Linda and I visited with Steve and gave us the tour, meeting Sanjay and Cindy Carlson and Nate Chen and all the amazing doctors and all the research that's going on at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I thought, well, I'm not a billionaire. We can certainly help out as we can, but I can use this platform to get the word out. And that's what we've been doing here these last few years. And we get to meet great people like you and so many others who are on the board of visitors. And we've learned a little bit about this. Learned a little bit about what they're doing to try to stop it, or at least slow it down. And I'm proud to be associated with this university and the work that's being done, the effort that's being made. As you and I both know, there are only so many of these type of efforts going on worldwide, and to know one of them is happening here in Madison is it's humbling and an honor to be a very small part of at least trying to get the word out to what they're doing.
Absolutely true. And I'm glad that you said worldwide, because that's one of the things that I noticed immediately, is that this is really having a global impact and really expanding throughout our area and our regions with different populations. And the education piece is so very important. But so are the studies. Have you given any thought to enroll in a study?
Yeah, that's where I'm still so chicken. It's yeah. Are you? You are, aren't you?
You know what? Ann Brewer, who was our chairwoman, and in fact, I want to say two things. One, being invited is the greatest gift of getting people involved, is it not? Yes. Somebody asks us to help, generally we say yes. So I want to share that with our caregiver community. If you have an opportunity to say yes, please do. Now, the study, Ann's like, so both of your parents, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, like you, Matt. I'm like, I don't know, but I actually am seriously considering it. Yeah. Because like you, as a writer, I have somewhat of a platform to be sharing not only what I learned, but I think from the human standpoint, just sharing what it feels like. So I'm thinking about it. Haven't pulled the trigger yet.
Yeah. No, it's definitely they're very personal decisions, because I think with any kind of study along these lines, where there's a certain fear factor, right? What are we going to learn here? In my case, as my mom had it, my dad, there was a dementia that it wasn't Alzheimer's specifically, but he, things were changing with him as well, and he had a slew of physical concerns for the last, especially 5-10 years of his life. But yeah, it's probably something that, being brutally honest here, right, I probably should do, but I haven't gotten there quite yet.
We share that, and it's like, I don't know what would it take to get you there. I ask myself that all the time. It's like, pull the trigger. You've done other things that have been a little bit weird. Not there yet. I want to open it up. We've got 20 minutes or so left to comments or questions, stories. Share the love with Matt, our listeners here. So I'd like to open it up now for any questions or comments you have before I ask my famous last question.
I'll jump in. Susan, I'm not shy. At least not in this state. So Matt, first of all, thank you. This was enlightening, inspiring, and touching. I have a comment, but I'm going to start with a question. My question is, as I was listening to you navigate the process, the months, the years, whatever it was, I was wondering, what did the moment, and maybe it wasn't a moment, when you had the acceptance of your reality, because you and your family at various times or in the beginning were in denial. You alluded to that. So what got you to a point where you could acknowledge your reality, or what was really going on? Was it a moment? Did it creep up on you? Was it a aha? Help me understand that piece.
That's a great question. I think by 2014, when it was after my father-in-law had passed, and I was talking about when Linda and I went back in the fall, October, for another visit to see my parents and also to visit Linda's mom and her family. That was the last time I was around my mom where she was able to do a little bit of cooking, be around the stove and be reasonably safe. But it was good that Linda was there. But even then, my mom and I we sat at the kitchen table, and she was talking about things that were not real, but to her they were. And instead of, I told my father, quit correcting her. I thought, okay, put your money where your mouth is, Matt, and just go with it. And I think by then I knew that, we were on a journey here. In 2012 with the diagnosis, it had hit like a ton of bricks, but it's still, it's not fully sinking in. And, so we're talking, a couple of years later where it was, for me, it was like, yeah, this is happening. And maybe part of it was we had hit with Linda's father, he had, it was not Alzheimer's, he had cancer. So maybe that in an indirect way played a part of it, but I would say probably a couple of years before I knew what the reality was, but you asked when I accepted it. It was probably by the fall of 2014. It took a little while.
And I don't think that's the least bit unusual. So I can only fathom, and my parents didn't die of that, but they had cancers and other things. And when you hear a diagnosis, whatever it is, I think there's a piece of, okay, intellectually I got that, maybe, sort of. But then there's also the piece of, I believe in miracles. I believe that doctors are human, which means they could make a mistake. Maybe this is going to change a little bit. And you give yourself, at least in my opinion, you give yourself a lot of outs in the beginning. At least that's how I view it.
Yeah.
Does that resonate?
Actually, it does. And as we sit here right now, I'm reflecting back on the time. And fortunately, I guess for me, selfishly speaking, I was not a witness to some of the really nasty outbursts my mom had. Where she was she was accusing my father and my brother of things that just were not happening. They did not do. But I heard all about it from, my dad, my sister, my brother. But in the fall of 2014, she seemed to be at a certain level of peace. So that made it probably easier for me to accept what was happening. And she did it at an earlier stage of the process. And I've talked about this in, public service announcements and other platforms. She asked me, "Do you think I'll get better?" And that was, you're like, in your mind, you're thinking, not unless there was a mistake, and a diagnosis, but you say, yeah, I think so, of course you're going to answer that way. So that was, you get enough of those kind of moments, but by but by the fall, when she had, I didn't see the absolute worst in her of the temper. I saw someone who was removed in a lot of ways from reality, but she herself seemed to be more at peace with things, and that made it easier for me.
Mm-hmm. So that's my question. I have a comment, and my comment is, my husband knew that I was going to be listening to you tonight and couldn't join me. And so I said, as we were driving home from someplace this afternoon, I said, so what is it about Matt that conjures up, what you heard, what you listened, why you enjoyed him? And he said two key things. Number one, he said, the warm voice. It was so easy to listen to him in any setting. There was just something wonderful about, in those moments, listening to you just made the day better. That was the first thing.
That's awesome.
And the second thing he said was, but the magic was his enthusiasm. If I couldn't be there on the 50-yard line or, at half court or in the front row seat of the Brewer game, he said, I got the next best thing because he put me there, which is, I believe, essentially what you're trying to do, put us there so that we can have a glimpse in of something that at the moment we can't be a part of. And that is exactly what you did for him. And I remember there was a time or two where we're driving somewhere and the game's not quite over, whether it was the Badger, or it was the Brewers or whatever. And so we'd take a longer route home because we didn't want to miss your call and the moment and how the experience that you gave us listening to that game, whatever that was. So thank you for all that you do. And I'm sure I'm one of thousands and thousands of people who are giving you these kinds of feedback, but sincerely, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that very, very much. That it is what we try to do. And, it's a very subjective business that we're in. So I never take what, your words for granted. So I appreciate that very much. Very humbling.
You're welcome.
And what a wonderful way to now, Matt, bring that same enthusiasm, that same warmth to the work of fighting Alzheimer's. So I'm going to ask if anybody has a question or a comment. I've got a final question for you, Matt, and a challenge, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, I have one quick one. It's more of a comment, too. I echo everything from Adele. I grew up and my family is basically religiously into sports and stuff. But I just want to thank you for telling your story and, using your platform, because I can totally, as a younger perspective, my grandma's in her 90s and I can see my mom kind of going through things with her siblings. She does not actually have dementia or anything, but I can already see the feuding going on. So the only comment I have is, I think using this platform is wonderful for somebody even like me that's a little bit younger, I want to say, and the education that I'm getting, I can see the future, how this would help. So I just kind of wanted to throw the comment out there and just say thank you for that work, because I think not only the people that are going through it like really quickly, it happens really quickly, but for people that could go through it, hopefully knock on wood, 15, 20 years down the line, more awareness is just wonderful. And I just wanted to echo everything and say thank you.
I appreciate that. We've, I've in my line of work, it's a small corner of the world in sportscasting, but there have been quite a few in the state of Wisconsin who have been touched by this with their own family members. So there have been, those of us who've kind of gotten together and have tried to use our platform for that. And maybe it's also me getting a little bit older myself now, where I just feel like I need to do something a little beyond calling the game, which is still the bread and butter for me. I thoroughly enjoy that. And, but if there's a way we can do some other things, then by all means, we need to take advantage of that. So I appreciate your kind words. Thank you very much.
What an absolutely perfect setup.
Uh-oh, and I'm getting worried.
Perhaps challenge for you, Matt. What's your final bit of advice for the caregiver community presented in the iconic voice of
Well, I go back to my advice is my mom's advice. Do the all we can do is the best we can. And I think I said at the end, don't tease people. Her thing was don't make fun of people. That was, I think, the direct quote. All we can do is the best we can and don't make fun of people. But, I think, Susan, one of the best pieces of advice I can give is you need to take care of yourself as well. And you know this, I know this, anybody who's gone through this, this is exhausting. It can be exhausting. But you need to, if you want to find the best way for you to be able to continue to help, if it's your mom, your dad, whoever it is, you need to take care of yourself. You need to get your rest. You need to have you have your distractions, your positive distractions. I think there's probably 100 different things that you and I could come up with. Like, okay, you should try this, you should try this, you should try this. But I think you do need to, it's okay to be a little bit selfish and do the things for you. Because if you do that, I think that will give you a better chance to actually help the person you're trying to help.
No question. And I would love to see that be part of our work at the Initiative to End Alzheimer's. I know that's part of the studies that are going on. How do we take time to care for ourselves? How do we get past the feeling of inadequacy so that we truly can care for the one that we love so very, very much?
And there are certainly practical pieces of advice. We were fortunate because we were so slow as a family to get my mom into memory care. And it can be difficult trying to find a place that can take you because you need it now, right? If you can kind of work ahead a little, it's an awful task, but the more of that you can do, I guess that's my best piece of practical advice is to try to get that squared away, even if you don't need to do this today or tomorrow. You have to try to take a certain amount of emotion out of this, which is next to impossible, I understand. But there are a lot of practical components to this, and the more you can learn about, some are better than others, right? The more you can learn about the facilities that are in your area, maybe the less stress that would be on you when the time comes where you have to do that. As you wrote in your book, there's quite a list of things that you need to do. So I guess that's my practical nugget that I would pass along.
Spoken in the beautiful, warm Matt Lepay voice. Matt, it has been absolutely a delight to have you. This is recorded, as I said early on. We will have the recording posted at susanamarshall.com. It will go into our archive. We have preserved you for eternity, Matt.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to seeing you again in August and really sharing what is happening at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, because it truly is having a global impact. And it's helping we caregivers in ways that I'm not even sure we always appreciate in the moment, but tremendously important. So thank you, Matt, sincerely.
It's great. Yeah, great to see you. Great to talk to you, Susan. Thank you to everybody. And I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. And step by step, we can find ways to slow this and help as many people as we can who are dealing with it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.